Today, woodworking is everywhere on YouTube, from people simply posting one-off videos of a passion project to established content creators with millions of followers and full production teams helping them to post weekly projects for regular viewers. Anyone with some scrap boards and a hammer can begin woodworking, and anyone with a phone can shoot video and share the projects they make. They might even create an unexpected viral sensation. But it wasn't always like this.
Hi, welcome to Getting Started in Woodworking.
This is a waggleometer. People frequently ask me how to read a tape measure.
You know, I was shooting video of my woodworking and historic house restoration work all through the 90s, but I couldn't really afford, it was on kind of with prosumer equipment, and I couldn't really afford the linear tape editing systems. So I never got into distribution. I just had content, but no way to get it out there.
All right, today we're stripping heavy paint buildup off of woodwork. You can see we've got this hard, heavy...
The first service I used was called Blip, and it was really like to serve those few of us who were doing it, just like a couple dozen people.
You can see it comes off in one thick piece.
So around 2005, I think it was when YouTube popped up. It had a few features that Blip didn't. So I just shuffled some of my videos over to YouTube. So that's how I got on YouTube early on. Woodworkers and old house nuts were learning things from each other rather than going to the university and getting an advanced degree in historic preservation. And, you know, not that there's anything wrong with that.
One wide ribbon of paint, which also helps control the lead paint risk because it's not broken up into a lot of fine powder.
The online services were making it easy for this horizontal spread instead of like the traditional vertical spread through academics or you know, big business filtering down to small business, that vertical spread of knowledge. This was like horizontal spread from peer to peer.
Now that gives a surface that's paintable. We'll just let that dry out.
Right now there's probably at least several hundred people all across the country and into Canada and a little bit over into the UK and even India that are using steam paint removal as a method based largely on, well, I don't know how many views has that gotten. It's probably at least 100,000 or something. And so, you know, like, and not that it's ever been like highly popular, but just like over that long term that you've noticed that nearly 20 years, is that information spreads widely. You know, this notion of sharing and growing ability to share that kind of detailed, nuanced information with video was huge because I could serve a lot more people.
I was playing around a lot with video and putting frames together to make videos, you know, stop motion stuff, gaming stuff, time-lapse stuff. And I had been sending those things around, you know, just to people that I knew, and it was like when YouTube came out, all of a sudden you could post easily to the internet video. They were tiny, but you could do it. So you kind of started just playing around. It's like, oh, this is cool. So there's some family stuff, and there's stop motion stuff, and there's, you know, just the things that I was doing at the time. And one of those things was getting into woodworking, and I found that the time-lapse stuff of woodworking projects was kind of fun because it was a long process that you could collapse down into a quick thing, and it was kind of fun to watch. And back then that was kind of new to see that.
It used to be, you know, so-and-so bit my finger, that sort of novelty sort of videos on YouTube, and now it's about shows, like the novelty's worn off.
I started to follow a lot of tech podcasts, and some of those tech podcasts were moving from just audio podcasting to what they at the time called video podcasts. So I was like, this is super cool, and no one is doing this outside of like tech and pure entertainment industry, comedy, things like that. Let's see what we could do with woodworking.
My name is Marc Spagnuolo, and welcome to the very first Wood Whisperer video podcast. I'm starting this podcast for a number of reasons, the most obvious of which is the fact that there just aren't many options out there anymore when it comes to woodworking education and entertainment. Now, you can buy some overpriced videos, maybe take some woodworking classes if you're lucky to live near a good school, or perhaps you can catch an episode of the New Yankee Workshop.
The initial YouTube videos were kind of, inspired by Norm Abram, perhaps. In that if you want to make a show about video about woodworking, it was an instructional video.
I think I was just trying to rip off Norm, really.
I think that was the ideal. I really missed shows like the New Yankee Workshop and Woodworks with David Marks. These were things I wanted to see more of. So, those guys being my heroes, if I was going to try this thing, I was, and I think very clearly, emulating some of that. I also was, at the time, Good Eats was one of my favorite shows with Alton Brown. So that was a huge influence on, imagine a Good Eats style show, but about woodworking. What if we can actually get deep into some of these topics and some of the science behind it? So I figured, I was actually just pretending. It was the fake it till you make it kind of concept to say, hey, let's do a show. It won't be weekly, but I'll do the best I can with my frequency. But let's make it entertaining, but also teach woodworking at the same time.
Instructional content, I guess, is more behind paywalls these days because the number of people that actually wanted instructional videos is such a small part of the audience.
But here we are 15 years later and still going. So I guess it worked out okay.
I started regularly posting around 2011.
I had been woodworking since I was 17, so I thought, okay, I've got some good information here that will help people build some things, and just tried to do that. I think anybody who makes something really wants to show it to somebody, and getting those comments and getting the feedback about something you made is pretty addictive.
It kind of peaked around 2016. And when I think of the videos that did really well for me, and if I'm just kind of perusing in my history, I'm like, oh, that was the beginning of 2017. That was the end of 2016. So those few videos, and I've done most of my best work since then, but that was when I think we were all getting tons of attention around 2016, 2017.
So I think 2013 or so is when it really picked up.
And I always tell people that I'm in the third generation.
One of the leading, if not the leading job that kids want to have these days is to be a YouTuber.
I was 12 when YouTube came out, so it was that was what I was watching. Everything I was watching was on YouTube.
It seems like the starting point and the reason for jumping into YouTube was different.
I joined YouTube basically actually because of a conversation in a bathroom with April Wilkerson.
Well, it used to be all there was no money in it. There was no prospect of money in it when I started.
Where I think a lot of the people in Generation 1, it still was out of the authentic sort of sharing and creative, just sort of not doing it from the perspective of monetizing it right away.
The reason I started in the first place was to share information and to give a starting point for somebody on doing a project that they don't know how to tackle otherwise.
The goal is to have anybody watch or learn something in a short period of time while giving them information, while packaging it all up in a way that it feels approachable. I think the key is like, how do you make it approachable to them?
I needed to have community and accountability around the thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to have the opportunity to impact people's lives for the better. And I needed my business to sustain to sustain my lifestyle.
It seems like we all did it because for our own reasons. Me, I just really like the idea of sharing information. And then about a year after making videos, I thought, cool, maybe I can actually make this into a living. But then pretty much after that generation, now people have started looking at it as, I can actually quit my job, and this is the way that I can make money making and building.
You can quit your job working 40 hours a week for some jerk and leave behind a regular paycheck and benefits and having your own life and weekends and evenings that are actually your own, to work for a way bigger jerk yourself and spend 85 to 100 hours a week with basically no boundaries in between what you do and what you used to like.
You know, I was introduced to the scene with people who were already established. Then I saw this little second generation of really aggressive content creators come through and really monetize their channel well. I really tried my best to aggregate what was most successful on the platform and then tailor that to what my strong suits are.
In 2016 was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And I was like, man, is this too late? You know, like June 2016, is this too late to start YouTube?
The market is there to consume as much content as you can put out.
What might be happening is sort of TikTokification.
Everything's getting shorter on these different platforms because it's just like consume. And then how do you make that possible from a creation standpoint?
The hustle mentality has been so just ingrained in our minds that it's actually almost become detrimental, because the truth of the matter is not everyone's thing should be a business, and not everyone is cut out to be a business person.
If I could switch to sustaining this lifestyle and momentum by putting out a monthly video, I can't even imagine my world, you know?
Yeah, it's like, maybe you just have to go back to what works. It's like, no, you can't, because what used to work doesn't work anymore.
People are starting to make their shows feel like TV shows, or they're just getting a more traditional production team behind them to where it's not the same thing as broadcast yourself.
My fear for any platform that starts off with user-generated content is that maybe at some point, lower quality user-generated content isn't welcome anymore.
There is no quicker way to ruin anything than to turn it into a business if you don't have the right pieces in place to be able to do so effectively, especially over the long term.
We have a YouTube middle class in woodworking. Like, we're never going to make that crazy clickbait money, but we're not stuck with scraps.
YouTube is a tough platform to start and use exclusively.
This is still a free resource that makes things possible that weren't possible 15 years ago.
None of this is hard. It's just time consuming, I would say.
I don't know the last time I watched a video within our own niche.
I have no idea what goes on in this community. I'm under a rock.
I don't actually regularly watch any woodworking channels.
I'd watched more YouTube than I had watched TV throughout my life.
When this is all said and done, and maybe when you and I are done doing what we do online, our lives are going to be really encapsulated in a very interesting way that I think is going to be awesome.